The Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Alvin Botes, has delivered a public lecture at the University of KwaZulu Natal focusing on a review of South Africa's role in the world after 30 years of democracy, including challenges and opportunities. This event coincides with the commemoration of OR Tambo Month, which DIRCO will use to recognize the legacy of the anti-apartheid icon. We are joined by the Deputy Minister. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. South Africa's role in the world after 30 years of democracy was essentially the crux of the topic you steered at this public lecture. What did you set out to achieve in scrutinizing this topic?
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Look, I think we have a responsibility as the Department of International Relations and Cooperation to ensure that we take our young people into confidence in relation to the opportunities and the challenges which the geopolitical dispensation present, and how do we utilize our foreign policy to respond to the triple challenges of unemployment, inequality and poverty. So essentially it was a mechanism through public diplomacy through which we had some both theoretical engagement that solicited high level of critical thinking from our young people from the University of KwaZulu Natal.
So what were some of the challenges and perhaps opportunities as we look at the loopholes that we're facing at the moment as a country?
Well, I think the first issue that, and maybe it's important to indicate that South Africa's foreign policy, it's premised on four concentric circles, which includes Pan-Africanism, global solidarity, North-South cooperation and transformation of global governance institutions. So if you look, for example, at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, as we speak, only 16% of all trade is actually done amongst African states itself. So the entirety of the 55 African Union states only trade 16%. The rest of trade goes outwards, to Europe, to America, to the Caribbean, etc. And so this mechanism through the Abuja Treaty, it's obviously a force multiplier in relation to the prosperity of the African continent. If South Africa wants to achieve the 6% economic growth that would make us to be more prosperous, what it means is that we should then be able to ensure that we enhance economic cooperation with our fellow neighbors and other member states in the African Union.
Yeah. In fact, we heard Minister Ronald Lamola promising that South Africa is going to fight for African benefit at the G20, where the country will use its permanent seat in the G20, which it will chair next year, to essentially push for the Africa agenda centered on ending conflicts, climate change, mitigation, and all sorts. What strategies will be implemented to drive those objectives?
Well, Paul, I think what Minister Lamola speaks about essentially is that there's a dialectical relationship between Africa's development, conflicts, and the question of political economy. For example, if you look at the difficulties within the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's home to approximately 60% of the world's cobalt, which is a key mineral that are utilized within your electric vehicles. And green economy, electric vehicles obviously is the game changer in terms of world economy. So there's a link between stability, instability, and political economy. And for example, Minister Lamola is quite correct. One of the key issues during our G20 presidency that we are evidently going to look about is the strategic consequence of strategic minerals within the African continent.
Yeah. South Africa, we know, as we flip topics here, Deputy Minister, will be returning to the International Court of Justice over the conflict between Israel and Hamas-led Palestinian militant groups. How much do you think, as today, very heavy and topical around the GNU, how much of an impact has the formation of the GNU had on South Africa's foreign policy? I ask you this because over the past 3 decades, the international community has come to know where South Africa stands when it comes to major geopolitical questions.
Well, I think, firstly, the Government of National Unity and the component constituency within it, I think came to appreciate over this 100 days, Mumpo, about the steadfast nature of our principal solidarity as South Africa in relation to the rest of the world. That's obviously espoused within our Bill of Rights and our constitutional dispensation, which argues for human dignity, human freedom, and social justice for all. So I think our GNU partners came to appreciate the importance of being steadfast to principle. But I think I want to be the first to acknowledge that the reconfiguration of government have enabled obviously a different and an improved posture from international financial capital. It have obviously enhanced investor confidence, and as a multiplier effect, you have seen the petrol prices have gone down, you have seen the repo rate have gone down, you have seen the strengthening of the rand. And business, organized business, have predicted that all things being equal, including our steadfast resolution on the load shedding scenario, that our GDP growth within the next 2 to 3 years may actually touch the 3% mark. So we are in exciting times. South Africans, you have seen with all the research conducted, are more confident today than yesteryear. So I think under the stewardship and the leadership of President Ramaphosa executing a principled foreign policy, we have seen obviously a very confident international community.
And we did indeed see it in the UK with the Deputy President as well as the President in the US. But I suppose one can't help but wonder at this stage what the stance is on 2 issues. One that would be the viewed as a sticking point for the DA is the ANC government's attitude towards Israel and its relationship with Russia, and then the posture by DA leaders and parliamentarians who point to a party that's decidedly pro-Ukraine and anti-Russia. It's of course also moderate on Israel and skeptical of the BRICS grouping. How is this being approached?
Well, I think the DA leader, Steenhuisen, have actually acknowledged the central consequence of what needs to be done for the Middle East peace process is the resolution of the 2-state solution, where you have a state that are secured for Israel, and you have an independent, prosperous state for the Palestine indigenous people. So there is unity of purpose in relation to our policy attitude towards the Middle East at this current juncture. Obviously, where we will continue to disagree, with some political parties, is that our characterization that the conduct of the state of Israel constitute, a genocidal conduct as it relates to the maiming, killing, and murdering of more than 42,000 innocent Palestinians, and including the current enlargement of the genocide. So there will be policy differences as it relates to that issues, but I think our partners have started to appreciate the central role of members of the P5, including the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, in relation to geopolitics and political economy in particular, Paul.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. We're going to have to leave it there. Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Alvin Botes, there speaking to us about some of the topical events this evening.